interesting than I find myself to be. I know that I might cause a scene, but have you ever thought that might just be what I want? Did you hear about the time that I killed a guy? Or about the time I lied and said I killed a guy? I know that I don't want to be alone. No, I don't want to be alone anymore than you do.
You're watching Studio Logia, featuring Skierkova. Seek truth, defend reason. Music for Studio Logia is performed by Gokart Mozart and is used with permission.
Hello, YouTube. Since becoming an atheist, I've been told by theists of various creeds that religion, whether necessary for our modern individual or not, was the progenitor of our modern ethics, provided the genesis of science, gave birth to philosophy, inspired the creation of the arts, and in any other way you can think of, is responsible for all that is good in human society. This issue came up recently in a discussion between myself and user HD Regmore, let me know if I've pronounced that wrong, in the comment section of his video, Atheism, a Moral Dilemma. Specifically, he asked me, can you give me one example of a civilization that has developed with a high level of technical advancement along with modern morality without the basic premise or inherent knowledge of God or gods? I won't bore you with the details of the rest of the conversation, but suffice it to say that I found the comment section inadequate to explain my answer to this question. I could, and did, refer to modern atheist nations, by which I mean organically atheist nations like Japan, Sweden, Denmark, or Norway, as opposed to state-imposed atheism like that found in North Korea, which merely replaces conventional religion with a purely artificial religion that might technically be atheist, but certainly isn't secular. This did not get us anywhere, however, because H.D. Regmore appeared to be referring not to the current state of any particular civilization, but to its entire historical lineage. After all, Sweden, for example, may be mostly atheist today, and may have low crime and happy citizens, but shouldn't we credit the Norse, Christian, and other creeds that dominated the various communities which came together and split apart, influenced one another, traded with one another, warred with one another, to eventually form the Sweden we know today? As I said, we were discussing morality, but this discussion could be had about almost anything considered valuable to a society. But there are three problems with this reasoning, which I will now explain. The first and most obvious problem, on which we won't dwell unduly, is that the question of whether or not religion has been useful, or is useful today, has nothing to do with whether or not it is true. Divine command ethics and revealed wisdom are essentially unsupported assertions. Even if we were to grant that a religious belief might offer a moral compass, that does not necessarily mean it would be a good or effective moral compass. Furthermore, teachings of religions fall largely into two categories: those that change radically from one faith to the next, such as sexual morality, dietary morality, or ritual morality, and those that hardly change at all, no matter what, if anything, you believe. The former often contradict one another, depending on what faith you were brought up with. The latter seem not to depend on religion at all. Neither makes a compelling case for religion being indispensable to the practice of morality. Even when we ignore these problems, the argument becomes circular reasoning. How do we know the claims of this holy text are true? Because they give us good moral guidance. But how do we know that guidance is actually good? Because it comes from God, of course. And how do we know that? Why, this holy book says so. To be fair, there are instances in which some of the moral teachings of a particular creed can also be defended by appealing to secular philosophy, rather than merely to divine command or revealed wisdom. But in these cases, what sense can we actually say they came from these religions? The second problem is that appealing to its usefulness as evidence of its truth is exactly backwards, because the idea of its being useful so often and so heavily depends upon the presumptions of its being true. For example, if Muslims and Jews are correct that pork is unclean and despised by the Creator of the universe and arbiter of the fates of our souls, then the moral teaching against eating it has a clear utility. If they're wrong, however, then this teaching is absurd, pointless, and causes humans to ignore a perfectly viable food source for no apparent good reason. Now, this criticism is not limited to theistic religion. In 1847, Ignaz Semmelweis was a physician working at the Vienna General Hospital's first obstetrical clinic. Disturbed by the fact that the first clinic had such dangerously high mortality compared with that of the second clinic run by midwives, and that women would literally beg on their knees not to be admitted to the first clinic, and would often give birth in the street rather than go to the first clinic, he began an investigation and eventually discovered that cadaverous particles, as he called them, were being transferred to patients by medical students who practiced autopsies along with assisting in the clinic. He instituted hand washing and immediately eliminated the previously unexplained mortality difference. Unfortunately, this practice was rejected by Semmelweis's contemporaries because of the dominance of the theory of dyscrasia, which held that disease was caused by disruptions in the balance of an individual's humors. As a result of this epistemological view, the establishment of the time caused the deaths of untold numbers of medical patients. So this is clearly a problem that can occur with secular science and philosophy, but then again, science and philosophy are equipped to eventually revisit and debate the truth of those assumptions. Religion, on the other hand, relies on faith and is utterly unfalsifiable, resorting to further revelation when it feels that it must change its doctrine to adapt. Additionally, as I mentioned discussing the first problem, religion produces many moral views. Some seem quite sensible when subjected to non-sectarian analysis. Others seem strange or arbitrary, and some strike us as monstrously immoral. So if good religious morality can be arrived at without religion, what actual purpose has religion served in bringing it about? And if we can see that the usefulness of religion in this role is dubious, why would we entertain it at the risk of importing irrelevant or even repugnant moral views? The third problem is historical, and can be applied to any reasoning that implores us to thank religion for one or another aspect of society which we all value. Let's look again at the question that H.D. Regmore asked of me. Can you give me one example of a civilization that has developed a high level of technical advancement along with modern morality without the basic premise or inherent knowledge of God or gods? You see, that's like asking me to name one person who has mastered Shakespeare without the benefit of the plica semilunaris. For those who don't know, which I imagine is most everyone, the plica semilunaris is a vestigial fold of tissue in the inside corner of your eye. In some other animals, such as fish, reptiles, and birds, it is known as a nictitating membrane, or an extra eyelid that's transparent or translucent. Most people would agree that it is silly to insinuate that a plica semilunaris is necessary in any way for understanding Shakespeare, but I would not be able to answer that question because everyone, whose eyes are not seriously deformed beyond the point of blindness, has the plica semilunaris. So in the same way, we cannot say for sure that religion isn't necessary for the historical foundation of a healthy society. We can't say for sure that the plica semilunaris isn't vital for interpreting Shakespeare's sonnets. But it's no coincidence that all of early society was religious. When you look at the history of human civilization, it becomes clear that it could not possibly have been any other way. It's currently 2011 AD. The idea of empirical reasoning emerged in Egypt in the 1600s BCE, and in the West with the empirical schools of Greece in the 300s BCE. In 1021 AD, Ibn al-Haytham published his Book of Optics, establishing the idea of using consistent methodology to extrapolate data into coherent theories. So, estimating liberally, we might say that the tools necessary for an individual to construct a coherent worldview built upon observable and testable data cannot have existed more than 3,600 years, and only in the last few centuries have they become popular. Human civilization has existed, at an absolute minimum, for 10 times as long as that, probably more, possibly a lot more. So for all of that time, humans were relying on intuition, rumor, dreams, and guesswork to figure out how the world works. They spawned all manner of mythology to explain the existence and nature of the world, the causes of the human experience, and the place humanity holds in the universe. Not surprisingly, most of these early ideas dealt with the stars, the seasons, and similarly inaccessible phenomena. And then, Each of these ideas had centuries to become entrenched before anything we might call science came along to compete in the marketplace of ideas. The point is, though, any theory, using the broadest possible sense of the term, which might emerge from a situation like that, would be immediately recognized as a religion if it were proposed today. In those early times, a word like religion probably wouldn't have had much of a meaning, because there was no distinction between religious views and the rest of a person's life. One could have been an atheist only in the sense that the mythology might not involve gods per se, but considering our penchant for agency detection, that is, our tendency to anthropomorphize the objects and forces in our lives, such belief systems would be in the very small minority, which is exactly what we see. So in conclusion, this whole conversation is irrelevant to the question of whether religion is true. Morality requires hard work, not unsupported assertions and appeals to authority. And finally, the fact that early humanity was religious is only what we would expect, and in and of itself proves nothing at all. Should the particulars of how religion influenced our moral development be recognized and studied? Of course! Knowing our history is extremely important in every endeavor. But that's what religion is to morality, part of its history. The promise of future human development lies in philosophy and science, not in divine commands and revealed wisdom. Thanks for listening.